Hello, everyone. Welcome into Above My Pay Grade. My name is Eric. Thanks for tuning in. If you could hit that like button, hit subscribe, it really helps me out. Thank you. I heard an interesting quote on Twitter from Jim Grant the other day. He said, if in baseball, on the sports magazines, you constantly saw pictures of the umpire and they were doing, these exposés on how great the umpire is and yada, 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 and where he gets his haircut and what he wears and all that, you start to think, I feel like there's something wrong with this game. This game is played by players, not umpires. So why are they focusing on them? And you start to think there's probably something wrong. Like maybe these umpires are being bought or they have an effect on the game that they shouldn't have. And that's exactly what's happening in financial markets when it comes to Jerome Powell and the Federal Reserve. They're kind of the umpires, and people are obsessed with what they say because we don't really have a free market system. And if you're like me, you probably think to yourself, you listen to financial jargon, and I kind of started getting into macro in 2020. So a lot of this stuff didn't make sense. But I'm going to try to explain why people paid so much attention to Jerome Powell. And your intuition that the system's broken, you're correct. Because 12 people meet 8 times a year and decide the price of money for the entire world. And the price of money, or money in general, is on one side of every transaction we make. So they're essentially doing price fixing around the world, which distorts the market immensely. So today, Jerome Powell raised interest rates 0.75%, 0.75. And why that matters and why markets are hanging on every word from Jerome Powell, we are in unprecedented times. We have inflation. We have record fiscal or record debt, both sovereign debt from countries, businesses, and personal debt. So there's so much debt in the system because people were able to refinance at a lower interest rate. So why does this matter to you? In this world of massive debt and people kept being able to refinance the debt at a lower interest rate, their payment was staying fairly steady. Even though they were taking on more debt, it's a lower interest rate, just like if you were to refinance your house, the payment goes down or stays the same, even if you take on more debt. But what happens when that hamster wheel reverses? And now interest rates are going up. Not just in the private sector, but in the government sector as well. Interest rates on $31 trillion in debt are going up. And all you got to do is do the math. What's 5% per year of 31 trillion? It's a little over $1.5 trillion in interest only on our government debt. Can governments afford that? The answer is no. And so Jerome Powell has these mandates of unemployment being fairly low and inflation and stable prices being right here, fairly low. Stable prices, inflation fairly low. So he's fighting this at a time when, in raising interest rates, when we have record debt. Never happened before. So that's why people are watching him, because when he sets the price of money for the market, it has an effect on government debt. And when the government has to raise interest rates, or the free market raises interest rates on government and loaning the government money, the government will just print it, which could potentially mean more inflation. Because if the government can't make up the difference, if their tax receipts are here and their expenses are here, they sell bonds to make up the difference. And that interest rate on that bond is extremely important. To put it in perspective, we're going to spend about $750 billion on interest this year on our debt. Nearly the amount of the United States military, most powerful military in the world. So that should put in perspective why the price of money is so important. And our economy for the last decade or more, really since the GFC, has relied on cheap money. And so when, like I said, the hamster wheel reverses, people watch Jerome Powell and they're like, how is this going to work? Everything's going to fall apart. And they're right. Because if Jerome Powell keeps tightening, that really means demand's going to drop to the floor. We're going to have an economic depression because companies are going to go bust because they cannot finance their debt. And then you really got to look at the countries and how much debt they have. How are these countries going to be able to afford it? Because when countries can't afford it, they can print the difference by selling bonds. But you got to wonder. But yes, it is important, and you are correct. If the umpires are on the cover of the magazine for a baseball game, and everyone's focused on who the umpires are and yada yada yada, you probably are correct that the game is broken. Everyone's focused on the Fed, and they're the umpires of our monetary system, and that's why I constantly say end the Fed, because that is not a free market phenomenon. And the reason we had all the bubbles we had in 2020 and 2021 is because they set the price of money at zero. So the money was just flowing, and it caused prices to go up significantly. Just think about it in your own life. If you bought a house at a 1% interest rate versus a 10% interest rate, how much more purchasing power do you have? Therefore, it drives up the prices. So they caused the inflation, and they're trying to end it. And one might think we should end the Fed instead of them trying to control and micromanage, like a game of chess, the economy. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Hopefully this was a helpful explanation. See you guys in the next one. Peace.